The sky was dark gray over London that morning. Rain fell softly as people walked with their heads down. This was not a normal day in the city. Something important was happening at Westminster Abbey. The famous old church stood tall and quiet as cars began to arrive. Inside Kensington Palace, Prince William stood by the window. He watched the rain and tried to be strong. His blue eyes looked tired and sad. He had not slept well for many weeks now. William wore a simple black suit with a dark tie. His hands shook a little as he fixed his collar. "It is time," said a gentle voice behind him. William turned to see Catherine, his wife. She wore a navy blue dress and had her hair pulled back neatly. Her face was calm, but William could see the worry in her eyes. They had been through so much together since they met at university. Today would be the hardest day yet. "How is he this morning?" William asked. "Brave," Catherine said. "Like always. Charlotte is helping him get ready." They walked down the long hallway of the palace. The walls were lined with old paintings of kings and queens from history. William thought about all those royal people who had faced hard times before him. None of it seemed to matter much today. They stopped at a door with two royal guards standing outside. The guards looked straight ahead, but their eyes were sad too. Everyone in the palace knew what was happening. Inside the room, 10-year-old Prince George sat on the edge of his bed. He wore a small black suit that made him look older than his years. His blonde hair was combed neatly to the side. His sister Charlotte, 8 years old, was helping him with his shoes. "Dad," George said when he saw William. His voice was quiet but not scared. "Is everyone going to be there?" William kneeled down in front of his son. He put his hands on George's small shoulders. "Yes, Grandfather Charles will meet us there. Uncle Harry has come from America. Everyone wants to be with you today." George nodded. He was young, but he understood this was serious. 3 months ago, doctors had found that George was very sick. The royal family had kept it private for as long as they could. They wanted George to have normal days without people staring or taking pictures. But now, the whole country knew. "Will it hurt?" George asked in a small voice. Catherine sat next to her son and put her arm around him. "The doctors will do everything to make sure it does not hurt, and we will be right there with you the whole time." Little Prince Louis, only 6 years old, came running into the room. He held a small teddy bear in his hands. "George, take Brown Bear," Louis said, holding out the toy. "He always makes me feel better when I am sad." George smiled and took the teddy bear. "Thanks, Louis." A palace worker appeared at the door. "Your Royal Highness, the cars are ready." William took a deep breath and nodded. He helped George stand up. The young prince moved slowly these days. "Remember what we talked about," William said to his family as they gathered in a small circle. "We are together. That is all that matters." They walked through the palace halls. Workers bowed their heads as the family passed. Outside, 3 black cars waited in the rain. Newspeople stood behind barriers, but they did not shout or take pictures like they usually did. Today was different. The first raindrops hit William's face as he helped George into the car. It mixed with a tear that had escaped from his eye. He quickly wiped it away before George could see. Today he needed to be strong for his son. As the cars pulled away from Kensington Palace, people on the streets stopped and watched. Some put their hands over their hearts. Others cried openly. The whole nation was watching and waiting, hoping for the best for young Prince George. The 3 black cars moved slowly through the wet London streets. Inside the middle car, Prince George looked out at the rain drops on the window. He traced one with his finger as it slid down the glass. His father William sat next to him, watching him with sad eyes. "Look, Dad," George said. "All the people." William looked out and saw crowds of people standing in the rain. They lined both sides of the road. No one shouted or waved flags like they usually did when the royal family passed by. Today they stood quiet and still. Many held flowers. Some had small lights or candles covered from the rain. "They are here for you," William said softly. "The whole country cares about you." George nodded but did not smile. He held the teddy bear that Louis had given him. His face looked very pale against his dark suit. Catherine sat on the other side of George. She reached over and fixed his collar even though it was already perfect. Mothers always need to do something with their hands when they are worried. "Are you warm enough?" she asked. "Yes, Mum," George replied. The cars passed by Buckingham Palace where the royal flag flew at half-mast. This was unusual. The flag only did that when someone in the royal family had died. But today was different. Today it showed that the whole royal family was sharing in George's pain. Princess Charlotte watched her brother closely. She was young, but she understood things were not right. She had heard her parents talking late at night when they thought the children were asleep. She knew words like treatment and hospital and very sick meant something bad. "I made you a card," Charlotte said, pulling a folded paper from her small purse. "I know you already saw it at home, but you can look at it again at the Abbey if you get scared." George took the card and opened it. Inside was a drawing of the whole family holding hands with a big sun shining above them. The words "Get better soon" were written in Charlotte's best handwriting with many colors. "Thanks, Charlotte," George said. He carefully put the card in his pocket. The cars turned onto the road leading to Westminster Abbey. More people stood in the rain. They held signs that said, "We love you, Prince George, and stay strong." Some people cried openly. Prince Louis looked confused at all the sad people. He was too young to fully understand what was happening. "Why is everyone so sad?" he asked. William put his arm around his youngest son. "They are sad because George is not feeling well, but they are also here to show they care." The cars finally stopped in front of Westminster Abbey. The old church with its tall towers looked even bigger on this gray day. A red carpet had been placed on the ground leading to the doors. Usually the red carpet was for happy events like weddings. Today it was to honor George. King Charles waited at the entrance under a large black umbrella. He looked older than his years today. When he saw the cars stop, he handed his umbrella to an aide and walked into the rain to meet them. The car door opened, and William stepped out first. Rain fell on his head, but he did not seem to notice. He reached back to help George out of the car. The young prince moved slowly and carefully. When King Charles saw his grandson, his face showed both love and pain. He walked forward and bent down to George's level. "My brave boy," Charles said. His voice broke a little on the words. "I am so proud of you." George gave his grandfather a small hug. Charles held him gently as if afraid he might break. Catherine, Charlotte, and Louis joined them. Together, the royal family stood in the rain for a moment. A group of doctors and nurses waited just inside the Abbey doors. They wore formal clothes instead of their usual white coats. William took a deep breath and looked down at George. "Ready?" he asked. George looked up at the huge old doors of Westminster Abbey. His small hand reached for his father's larger one. "Ready," he said. The great doors of Westminster Abbey opened slowly. Prince George looked up at the high ceiling as he walked inside with his family. The Abbey was very old and very large. Kings and queens had been crowned here for hundreds of years. Today it was quiet and felt almost empty, even though many people sat in the rows of seats. A soft music played from somewhere. It was not sad music, but calm and gentle. The stone floors of the Abbey had been covered with soft red carpet to make walking easier for George. His legs got tired quickly these days. William kept his hand on George's shoulder as they walked. Catherine held George's hand on the other side. Charlotte and Louis walked just behind them with King Charles. Everyone in the Abbey stood up as they entered. "So many people," George whispered to his father. William nodded. "They all care about you." George saw his Uncle Harry and Aunt Megan sitting near the front. They had come all the way from America to be here today. Harry gave George a small smile and a thumbs-up sign. Next to them sat Catherine's parents and her sister Pippa. George's other grandparents and aunts and uncles were all there too. The Prime Minister stood with other important government people. Leaders from other countries had come as well. Even people who were usually on TV or in movies sat quietly in the rows. But what surprised George most was seeing some of his school friends. His best friend Thomas sat with his parents. George had not seen Thomas since he got sick and had to stop going to school. Thomas waved when he saw George looking at him. At the front of the Abbey, a special area had been set up. It did not look like a hospital room, but there were machines and medical things behind screens. 5 doctors and 6 nurses stood nearby in nice clothes instead of their normal work clothes. George had met some of them before during his treatments. The Archbishop of Canterbury, an old man with kind eyes and a beard, stood in his special robes. He would lead the service today. This was not a normal church service or a royal event. It was something new that had been planned just for George. William helped George sit in a special chair at the front. Catherine sat on one side and William on the other. Charlotte and Louis sat just behind with King Charles. The rest of the royal family filled the front rows. The Archbishop stepped forward and spoke in a gentle voice. "We gather today in this holy place to support Prince George and the royal family. In this ancient abbey where kings and queens have prayed for 1,000 years, we now pray for the health and healing of a young prince." George listened carefully. He knew this was all for him, but it still felt strange. He was just a boy who liked football and video games and playing with his dog. Now all these important people were here because he was sick. Dr. Wilson, George's main doctor, came forward and spoke quietly to William and Catherine. She was the best children's doctor in the country. The Queen had given her a special award last year for her work helping sick children. "Everything is ready," Dr. Wilson said. "We can begin when you feel Prince George is comfortable." William looked at Catherine. They had talked about this day for weeks. The new treatment George needed was very special. It would be done here in the Abbey instead of a hospital because the royal family wanted George to be in a place of hope and history rather than in a cold hospital room. "George," William said softly, "are you ready to start the treatment now?" George looked around at all the faces watching him. Some people were crying. Others looked worried. His brother Louis had his thumb in his mouth, which he only did when he was scared. Charlotte was trying to look brave. George took a deep breath. He was only 10 years old, but today he felt much older. He thought about what his father had told him about being a prince. Sometimes being brave meant doing hard things. "I am ready," George said. The Archbishop nodded, and the service began. The Abbey grew quiet as Dr. Wilson and her team moved forward. They brought their equipment closer to where George sat. Everything had been planned very carefully so it would not look scary. Dr. Wilson smiled at George. She had a kind face and always spoke to him like he was a grown-up, not just a child. "Hello, Prince George," she said. "Today we will give you the first dose of the new medicine. It might make you feel a bit tired, but it should not hurt. Is that okay?" George nodded. He rolled up his sleeve without being asked. He had done this many times before in the hospital. A nurse named Emma came forward with a small tray. On it was a needle with medicine. The medicine was special and had been made just for George. Scientists had worked day and night for weeks to create it. William held George's hand as Emma found a vein in his arm. Catherine stroked George's hair and spoke softly to him. "Look at me, darling," she said. "Tell me what you want to do when we go to Balmoral Castle next month." Balmoral was the royal family's home in Scotland. George loved it there. He could fish and walk in the woods and not worry about people taking his picture. "I want to climb the big hill with Grandpa Charles," George said, "and swim in the lake if it is warm enough." Emma carefully put the needle in George's arm. He barely noticed because he was thinking about Balmoral. The new medicine went slowly into his vein. Outside the Abbey, thousands of people waited in the rain. The news showed pictures of crowds standing quietly. In schools across Britain, children stopped their lessons to think about Prince George. The country had never seen anything like this before. Inside, the Archbishop read words from old books. They were words about hope and healing that had been read in the Abbey for hundreds of years. The words seemed to float up to the high ceiling and fill the space with something special. Princess Charlotte watched her brother closely. She was worried but trying not to show it. Louis had fallen asleep on King Charles's lap. He was too young to sit still for so long. Harry and Meghan sat holding hands. Even though they lived far away now, they had come as soon as they heard about George. Some people were surprised to see them back in England, but family was more important than old arguments. The medicine took 30 minutes to go into George's arm. When it was finished, Emma took the needle out and put a small bandage over the spot. "Well done, Prince George," Dr. Wilson said. "You did very well. How do you feel?" George thought for a moment. "A bit tired, and my head feels funny." Dr. Wilson nodded. "That is normal. The medicine is very strong. You might feel sleepy soon." William looked worried. "Should we take him home now?" "Not yet," Dr. Wilson said. "We need to watch him for a little while to make sure the medicine is working properly." The Archbishop stepped forward again. "While we wait, we will have some music. Prince George, I believe your school choir has prepared something for you." George looked surprised. From the side of the Abbey, 20 children walked out wearing their school uniforms. They were George's classmates from his school in London. Their teacher led them to the front where they stood in 2 neat rows. The children began to sing. It was a song about friendship and hope that George knew from school. He had sung it many times with these same friends before he got sick. Now they were singing it just for him. As the children sang, George started to feel very tired. His eyes wanted to close. The medicine was making him sleepy, just like Dr. Wilson said it would. "Dad," George whispered, "I think I need to lie down." William looked at Catherine with worry in his eyes. She nodded, and they helped George move from the chair to a small bed that had been set up nearby. It was not a hospital bed, but looked like one from a palace bedroom, with nice covers and pillows. The singing continued as George lay down. His eyes grew heavier. The last thing he saw before falling asleep was his father's face looking down at him. William tried to smile, but his eyes were wet with tears he could not hold back anymore. George slept as the Abbey stayed quiet. Only the soft sounds of people moving or whispering broke the silence. Dr. Wilson checked George every few minutes. She looked at machines that showed his heart rate and breathing. William did not leave George's side. He sat in a chair next to the bed, holding his son's small hand. Catherine sat on the other side, gently stroking George's hair. The world outside might see them as royal, but in this moment they were just worried parents. Charlotte and Louis had been taken to a side room to rest and have something to eat. King Charles stayed in the main abbey, talking quietly with the doctors when they were not busy with George. 3 hours passed this way. Some people left the abbey to get food or fresh air, but most stayed. No one wanted to leave until they knew George was okay. Finally, George began to wake up. His eyes opened slowly, and he looked confused for a moment. "Mom," he said in a small voice. Catherine leaned closer. "I am here, darling. Dad is here too." George tried to sit up but felt too weak. William helped him drink some water from a cup. "How do you feel?" William asked, trying to keep his voice normal and not show his worry. "Strange," George said. "Like my body is very heavy, but my head does not hurt anymore." This was good news. George had been having bad headaches for weeks before the treatment. Dr. Wilson came over when she heard George was awake. "The medicine seems to be working well," she said after checking him. "Your body is accepting it just as we hoped." For the first time that day, William and Catherine allowed themselves small smiles of hope. This new treatment was their last chance. Other medicines had not worked to fight George's illness. The Archbishop announced that George was awake and doing well. A happy murmur went through the crowd in the Abbey. Outside, the news spread quickly through the waiting crowds. Some people cheered and hugged each other. Charlotte and Louis were brought back to see their brother. Charlotte had made a new drawing for George while he slept. Louis just wanted to climb on the bed with George, but Catherine held him back gently. "George needs space right now," she explained. "You can sit next to him, but be very gentle." George managed to smile at his brother and sister. "Did I sleep a long time?" he asked. "Ages and ages," Louis said dramatically. "I had lunch and played games, and you were still sleeping." George's Uncle Harry came to visit next. He sat on the edge of the bed and showed George something on his phone. "Look who wants to say hello," Harry said. On the screen was Harry's son Archie and daughter Lilibet. They were George's cousins but lived in America. They waved and said they hoped he would feel better soon. "Maybe you can visit us in California when you are better," Archie said from the screen. "Dad says we can take you to Disneyland." George smiled at this idea. "I would like that," he said. As the day went on, George felt stronger. The doctors were pleased with how well the treatment was working. Usually, patients had to stay in hospital after such strong medicine, but they had brought everything needed to the Abbey instead. By late afternoon, George was able to sit up in bed and eat a little food. This made everyone happy, especially Catherine. She had been so worried when George stopped eating properly weeks ago. "The medicine is working faster than we expected," Dr. Wilson told William and Catherine quietly. "This is very good news, but we must still be careful. This is just the first treatment." William nodded. He understood that George would need more treatments. The illness was not gone yet, but for the first time in months, there was real hope. Outside the Abbey, the rain had stopped. The sun came out and made the wet streets shine. People took this as a good sign. Some said it was like the sky was celebrating for Prince George. Inside, William finally allowed himself to step away from George's bed for a moment. He went to stand by one of the tall Abbey windows. The sunlight came through the colored glass and made patterns on the stone floor. King Charles joined him there. The two men stood in silence for a moment, both thinking about George. "He is so brave," Charles said finally. "Braver than I would have been at his age." William nodded. "Braver than I am now." Charles put his hand on his son's shoulder. Both men had wet eyes, but they were no longer tears of only sadness. Now there were tears of hope too. As evening came, most people left the Abbey. Only the royal family and closest friends stayed. The doctor said George could go home to Kensington Palace if he continued to do well for a few more hours. George was feeling much better. The color had returned to his face. He even laughed when Louis showed him a funny dance he had made up while George was sleeping. "You look silly," George told his little brother. "I made it up just for you," Louis said proudly, "to make you happy." Catherine watched her children with tears in her eyes. It had been weeks since she had heard George laugh like that. The sound filled her heart with joy. Dr. Wilson came to check George one more time. She looked at all the numbers on the machines and wrote things in her notes. "Everything looks good," she said. "I think we can disconnect the machines now. Prince George can return to the palace to rest in his own bed." William shook Dr. Wilson's hand. "Thank you," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "We cannot thank you enough for what you have done." "This is just the first step," Dr. Wilson reminded him. "Prince George will need to come back for more treatments. But yes, today has gone very well." The news that George could go home spread quickly. Outside the Abbey, people who had waited all day cheered. The police had to make sure the path was clear for the royal cars. Inside, the royal family got ready to leave. George was still too weak to walk far, so William picked him up carefully. The boy put his arms around his father's neck and rested his head on William's shoulder. "Dad?" George said quietly so only William could hear. "Yes, son. Am I going to get better now?" William swallowed hard before answering. He had promised George he would always tell him the truth, even when it was hard. "The doctors are doing everything they can," William said. "This new medicine is the best in the world, And you are the bravest, strongest boy I know." George seemed to understand what his father was not saying. He nodded against William's shoulder. "I will try my hardest to get better," he promised. This time William could not stop his tears. They ran down his face as he held his son close. "I know you will," he whispered. Catherine gathered Charlotte and Louis. The family walked slowly down the main aisle of the Abbey. King Charles and the rest of the family followed behind them. At the door, the Archbishop of Canterbury said a final prayer for George. His kind voice echoed in the large space. "May God watch over Prince George and give him strength and healing. May his family find comfort in their love for each other. And may we all remember what truly matters in this life." Outside, the evening air was cool, but the rain had stopped. The crowd cheered when they saw George in William's arms. The young prince gave a small wave which made people cheer even louder. Camera lights flashed, but not too close. The press had been told to stay at a distance. Still, pictures of William carrying George with tears on his face would be on every newspaper in the world the next day. The royal cars waited. William put George carefully in the back seat of the middle car. Catherine sat next to him with Louis on her lap. Charlotte climbed in on the other side of George. As the cars drove away from Westminster Abbey, George looked back at the old building through the window. "It was nice that they did the treatment there instead of the hospital," he said. "The Abbey is pretty." "Yes, it is," Catherine agreed. "And full of history. Kings and queens have been going there for help and hope for many hundreds of years." "Like us today," George said. "Yes, like us today," William agreed. The cars drove through London as the sun began to set. People stood on the streets and waved as they passed. Some held signs saying, "Get well soon, Prince George," and "We love you." At Kensington Palace, everything was ready for George's return. His room had been prepared with fresh sheets and his favorite toys. The palace chef had made all his favorite foods in case he was hungry. The cars stopped and palace workers came out to help. William insisted on carrying George again, even though palace workers offered to help. "I can carry my own son," William said firmly. As they walked into the palace, William thought about the day. It had been the hardest day of his life, but also one filled with hope. For the first time in months, George seemed like himself again. Inside the palace, the rest of the family said goodnight. They would all return to their own homes now that George was safe. Harry and Meghan would fly back to America the next day. "We will video call tomorrow to see how you are," Harry promised George. "Okay, Uncle Harry," George said with a tired smile. Finally, it was just William, Catherine, and their 3 children alone in their palace apartment. The day had been long and emotional for all of them. William sat in a chair next to George's bed, watching his son sleep. It was late now, past midnight. Catherine had put Charlotte and Louis to bed hours ago. Now she came into George's room and put her hand on William's shoulder. "You should get some rest too," she said softly. "The doctor said he will sleep through the night." William nodded but did not move. "I just want to watch him breathe for a while," he said, "to make sure he is really okay." Catherine understood. She pulled up another chair and sat next to her husband. Together, they watched their son sleep peacefully. "Today went better than we hoped," Catherine said after a while. "Yes," William agreed. "Dr. Wilson said the treatment is working even better than expected." "Do you think this could be it?" Catherine asked. "The treatment that finally works." William took her hand. "I hope so. I really hope so." They sat in silence for a long time, just being together as a family. Finally, Catherine stood up. "I am going to check on the other children," she said. "Try to get some sleep, William, even if it is just in that chair." After Catherine left, William leaned closer to George's bed. His son looked so small and young in his sleep. It was hard to believe that one day this boy would be King of England. Right now, all William wanted was for him to have a chance to grow up healthy and happy. "I love you, George," William whispered, "more than you will ever know." William must have fallen asleep in the chair because the next thing he knew, sunlight was coming through the windows. George was still sleeping peacefully. William stretched and checked his watch. It was 7 in the morning. Catherine came in with a cup of tea for William. "You slept here all night," she said. It was not a question. "I wanted to be close if he needed me," William said, taking the tea. "Has Dr. Wilson called?" "Yes, just a few minutes ago," Catherine said. "She will come to check George at 9. She said based on all the readings from yesterday, everything looks very good." William felt relief wash over him. He had been so worried that George might get worse during the night. That had happened after other treatments. "What about the press?" William asked. "They are outside the palace gates, of course," Catherine said. "Hundreds of them." And Charles called. He said people have been leaving flowers and cards at Buckingham Palace all night and this morning. William nodded. The public had been very supportive since the news of George's illness became public. Letters and cards came to the palace every day from all over the world. A small sound from the bed made them both turn. George was waking up. He opened his eyes slowly and looked around his room. "Good morning," William said, moving to sit on the edge of the bed. "How do you feel today?" George thought for a moment. "Hungry," he said. Catherine laughed with surprise and joy. George had not been hungry for weeks. His illness had taken away his appetite. This was another good sign that the treatment was working. "What would you like for breakfast?" she asked. "Pancakes," George said, "with syrup and berries." "I will tell the cook right away," Catherine said, leaving the room quickly before George could see the happy tears in her eyes. William helped George sit up in bed. The boy still looked tired, but much better than yesterday. "Can I get up today?" George asked. "We need to wait for Dr. Wilson to check you first," William said. "But if she says yes, then maybe you can sit in the living room for a while." George seemed happy with this answer. William helped him drink some water and then brought him a book to read while they waited for breakfast. Charlotte and Louis woke up soon after. When they heard George was awake and feeling better, they wanted to see him right away. "Be gentle," Catherine warned them as they ran into George's room. "Your brother still needs rest." Charlotte climbed carefully onto the foot of George's bed. Louis was about to jump on the bed too, but William caught him in midair. "Easy, Louis," William said with a laugh. "George is still recovering." Louis wiggled in his father's arms. "But George is better now, right, Dad? The doctor fixed him yesterday." William and Catherine exchanged a look. They had tried to explain to Louis that George's illness would take time to cure, but he was too young to really understand. "The medicine is helping George feel better," Catherine explained gently. "But he will need more medicine and lots of rest." "The cook is making pancakes," George told his siblings to change the subject, "with lots of syrup." This news made Louis forget everything else. Pancakes were his favorite too. Breakfast was brought to George's room on trays. The whole family sat on and around George's bed to eat together. It felt almost like a normal family morning, something they had not had for a long time. After breakfast, Dr. Wilson arrived to check on George. She listened to his heart and looked in his eyes. She checked the small mark on his arm where the needle had been. "Everything looks very good," she said finally. "Prince George is responding to the treatment exactly as we hoped." William and Catherine both let out breaths they did not know they were holding. "Can I get up today?" George asked Dr. Wilson directly. She smiled at him. "Yes, but not for too long. You can sit in a chair or on the sofa for a little while, but then back to bed for a rest this afternoon." George seemed happy with this answer. Dr. Wilson turned to William and Catherine. "We should schedule the next treatment for 3 days from now," she said, "but it can be done here at the palace. We do not need to go back to the Abbey." The next day was warm and sunny, perfect weather for a balcony appearance. William and Catherine got the children ready carefully. George wore a simple blue suit. Charlotte had a blue dress to match her brother. Louis wore a small suit too, though he complained about the tie. "It is too tight," he said, pulling at it. "You look very handsome," Catherine told him, fixing the tie again. "And this is a special day for your brother. We all want to look our best." They traveled to Buckingham Palace in 2 cars. King Charles was already there waiting for them. When he saw George walking into the palace on his own, he got tears in his eyes. "Look at you," Charles said, giving George a gentle hug. "Standing tall and strong again." "The doctor says I am all better now," George told his grandfather proudly. Charles looked at William and Catherine with questioning eyes. They both nodded, confirming what George had said. "That is the best news I have ever heard," Charles said. His voice was rough with emotion. Palace workers moved around them, getting everything ready for the balcony appearance. Outside, huge crowds had gathered. People wanted to see Prince George and celebrate his recovery. A palace worker came to tell them it was time. The family walked through the grand rooms of the palace to the balcony doors. William could hear the crowd outside. Their cheers were so loud they could be heard through the thick palace walls. "Ready?" William asked, looking at each member of his family. Everyone nodded. George stood a little straighter and took a deep breath. The doors opened and sunlight streamed in. The royal family stepped out onto the famous balcony of Buckingham Palace. The cheers from the crowd grew even louder when they saw George. Thousands of people filled the space in front of the palace. They waved British flags and held signs saying, "Hooray for Prince George," and "Thank you NHS," for the National Health Service doctors who had helped him. George looked surprised at how many people had come. He gave a small wave, and the crowd roared with approval. Tears fell from some people's eyes as they saw the young prince looking healthy again. Just a few months ago, they had seen him looking so ill at Westminster Abbey. Catherine bent down and said something in George's ear. He nodded and then stepped forward a little. He gave a bigger wave with both hands. The crowd loved it. George looked up at William. "They are so happy," he said with wonder in his voice. "You have given everyone hope," William told him. "People love to see someone beat a serious illness, especially a child." The family stayed on the balcony for 15 minutes. George stood the whole time without getting tired. Louis made people laugh by making faces and waving too hard. Charlotte stood perfectly like a little princess, waving just the right amount. Finally, it was time to go back inside. The family waved one last time, and then turned to leave. As they walked back through the palace, George walked close to William. "Dad," he said quietly, "when I grow up and become king, will I be able to help other children who are sick like I was?" William felt his heart fill with pride. Even after all George had been through, he was thinking about helping others. "Yes," William said, "when you are king, you can do many things to help people. That is what being royal is really about." "Good," George said, "because I want all children to get better like I did." Later that day, the palace released an official photo of the family. In it, they all sat together in the garden of Kensington Palace. George was in the middle, smiling brightly. The photo went around the world with the headline, "Prince George fully recovered." That evening, there were small fireworks shows in parks across London to celebrate. William and the family watched from the palace windows. "Look, George," Charlotte said excitedly. "They are all for you." George watched the colorful lights in the sky. "Not just for me," he said wisely. "They are for all the doctors and scientists who made the medicine, and for everyone who helped." William put his arm around George's shoulders. His son had always been thoughtful, but his illness had given him wisdom beyond his years. As summer turned to fall, George got stronger every day. By September, Dr. Wilson said he could return to school for half days. By Christmas, he was back full-time, playing sports and doing everything he had done before getting sick. The illness changed the royal family in many ways. William and Catherine started a new charity to help children with serious illnesses. King Charles created a special award for doctors who developed new treatments for children. But the biggest change was in how they lived their daily lives. They spent more time together as a family. William turned down some royal duties to be home more. Catherine did the same. "That is a good idea," William said finally. "If you feel strong enough, we could all go to the balcony tomorrow." They called the palace staff and began to make arrangements. By that evening, the news had spread. Prince George was better. The treatment had worked. The young prince would appear on the balcony of Buckingham Palace the next day at noon. That night, William tucked George into bed himself. It was something he had done when George was younger, before he got sick. "Are you excited about tomorrow?" William asked as he pulled the covers up. George nodded. "I am happy people will know I am better. I did not like it when everyone was sad because of me." "They were sad because they care about you," William said. "And tomorrow they will be happy for the same reason." "Dad," George said as William was about to turn off the light, "when I was very sick, were you scared?" William sat back down on the edge of the bed. He had always tried to be honest with his children, even about hard things. "Yes," he said, "I was very scared." "Me too," George admitted, "but I tried to be brave like you told me princes should be." William felt his throat get tight with emotion. "You were the bravest person I have ever known," he said, "and I am so proud of you." George smiled, and his eyes started to close. He was still getting tired easily. "I love you, Dad," he said sleepily. "I love you too," William said, "more than anything in the world." William turned the light off and stood in the doorway watching his son fall asleep. But this time there was no fear in his heart, only thankfulness and joy. 3 months passed. Spring turned into summer. George had received 12 treatments, 6 at the palace and 6 at the hospital. Each time, the medicine made him sleep for hours. Each time, he woke up a little stronger. Dr. Wilson came to the palace every week to check George. Today was a special day. Today she would tell the family if the treatment had worked completely. William tried to stay calm as he waited in his office. Catherine was with George, helping him get dressed. Even though George was feeling much better, William still worried. What if the tests showed the illness was still there? What if all this hope was for nothing? There was a knock at the door. Catherine came in with George. The boy looked almost like his old self again. His hair had grown back thick and blonde. His cheeks had color. He walked into the room without help. "Dr. Wilson is here," Catherine said. Her face showed she was as nervous as William. William stood up. "Let us go and hear what she has to say." They went to the palace living room where Dr. Wilson waited. She had a folder of papers with her. Test results from last week, when George had gone to the hospital for scans and blood tests. "Good morning, Your Royal Highnesses," Dr. Wilson said formally. Then she smiled at George. "How are you feeling today, Prince George?" "Very good," George said. "I played football with my dad yesterday in the garden." "Did you?" Dr. Wilson looked pleased. "And did you get tired?" "A little," George admitted, "but not too much." William and Catherine sat on either side of George on the sofa. William could feel his heart beating fast in his chest. Dr. Wilson opened her folder. "I have the results of all the tests here," she said. "As you know, we have been watching Prince George's progress very carefully over these 3 months." William took Catherine's hand behind George's back. They held on to each other tightly. "The treatment has been successful," Dr. Wilson said. "All the tests show the illness is gone." For a moment, no one spoke. The words seemed too good to be true. "Gone?" Catherine asked. "Completely gone?" Dr. Wilson nodded. "Yes, I can officially say that Prince George is in full remission. The illness is no longer in his body." William felt like he could not breathe. Then George looked up at him with a huge smile. "Does that mean I am better now, Dad?" he asked. William pulled George into a tight hug. "Yes," he said, his voice breaking. "Yes, you are better now." Catherine joined the hug, wrapping her arms around both of them. They stayed that way for a long time, just holding each other. Of course, we will continue to monitor Prince George closely, Dr. Wilson said when they finally separated. He will need checkups every month for the first year, then every 3 months after that. Whatever you recommend, William said. He could not stop smiling. We will do anything you say. Can I go back to school now? George asked. He had been doing lessons at home with a teacher who came to the palace. Not right away, Dr. Wilson said. Your body still needs time to get stronger, but maybe by the start of the new school year in September, if you continue to improve. George seemed happy with this answer. And can we still go to Balmoral in August like we planned? Yes, Dr. Wilson said. The fresh air in Scotland will be good for you. Just remember not to overdo things. You still need plenty of rest. After Dr. Wilson left, William called King Charles with the good news. Catherine called her parents. Then William and Catherine had to decide how to tell the public. We should make an official statement, William said. People have been so supportive. They deserve to know George is better. Catherine agreed. And we should thank everyone. The doctors, the scientists who made the medicine, all the people who sent cards and good wishes. Can we go to the balcony? George asked. Like on special days. I want to wave to everyone. William looked at Catherine. The balcony appearances at Buckingham Palace were usually only for very special occasions like after royal weddings or during official celebrations.